Revolution is born in the heart of the revolutionary the moment they find a cause worthy of sacrifice. You and I have a cause worthy of sacrifice. We carry the greatest message this world has ever known: faith, hope, and love. It's a revolutionary message with red letters. Revolution doesn't come cheap, it will cost you. Sacrifice is the fuel that feeds the fires of revolution. For the revolutionary, the cause is worth dying for because nothing else is worth living for. Choose to fall out of line. Live a radical life. Show the world a radical love and speak a radical language. They will label you a radical, a rebel, a misfit, a freak. But deep inside, you know what you are. You're revolutionary.
For most of us so far, this has been a rather uneventful and quiet day. After all, we've only been up for a few hours, and so not a lot has happened. But we know, if today is like most other days, we know that by the time this day is over, all of us have been called upon to make some choice, to have to make some decision that involves each of us taking a risk. And whenever we're trying to make those decisions about should we do this or should we do that, we weigh the options. What's the investment I have to make? What's the sacrifice I have to be willing to do? And is the sacrifice worth whatever it is I'm going to be doing in my time, my energy, my resources, my money, whatever it is? And we make these risks every single day of our lives as we make the decisions that impact sometimes everything. How many of you have ever seen or currently watch the game show Jeopardy on TV? Okay, most of you watch it. This week, there has been somebody on the game show Jeopardy who has taken a risk after risk after risk and has been vilified. He's been called a villain because of what he's been doing on Jeopardy this week. Arthur Chu.
So finally tonight, have you been following it? A lot of people arguing about a new Jeopardy champion who seems to have used science to unlock a kind of secret to winning. So in Jeopardy style, if the question is, he has everyone talking, the answer is, who is Arthur Chu? ABC's Lindsay Davis.
8,000 only.
Here's the clue. He's won almost $103,000 so far.
$102,800.
But his unusual game strategy has die-hard Jeopardy fans in a tizzy.
Arthur has command of the board.
The correct answer? Who is Arthur Chu? After Chu's 4 wins, a flurry of tweets and postings like, "This is the face of a Jeopardy villain," and "No respect for Jeopardy tradition."
So what is Chu's unusual method? Let's take game strategy for 400. While the typical contestant often sticks with one category and goes from top to bottom, Chu often jumps around the board, keeping his opponents guessing and one step behind.
Our term 1,600.
Daily double.
He also hunts down the daily doubles.
Getting nautical 2,000.
Daily double. The other one.
Typically found in the bottom 2 rows, keeping them for himself, even if he doesn't know the answer.
$5.
$5. Oh, don't feel confident in sports. All right, here is the clue.
The strategy of the game is not just playing offense, but playing defense, trying to deny your opponent's opportunities to score on you.
Some websites now hailing him a hero, a mad genius. And while he could have been cutthroat in his final Jeopardy wager by raising it just $1, he did this.
Interesting wager. 8,600. That takes you to 26,800. We have a tie.
And we may just have someone who's finally cracked the code of America's favorite quiz show. Lindsay Davis, ABC News, New York.
This week, Arthur Chu has been making the news, getting his 15 minutes. Well, I think it was only actually 5 shows on Jeopardy, so whatever that comes out to, 2.5 hours of fame. But lots of people have been talking about the risks that he's been taking, the way he's been playing the game. And actually, when he was finally loses and goes off the game show, $297,200 is what he won. And he does it by this strategy where he jumps all around the board and he's always looking for the daily double. And even if he doesn't know it, then he's going to take it and, wager $5 so that nobody else can get to it. And he's blowing the minds of all of the Jeopardy purists that are in the world. And millions and millions and millions of people have been watching him this week as he's been taking risk after risk after risk. Some are lifting him up as an amazing champion for what he's doing, but others are complaining and calling him names. But regardless of which side you're on, people have been talking about the risks that Arthur Chu has been taking. Now, last week he also lost. Finally lost. There was a question about a king of England, and he said George II, and somebody else said George V. The person who beat him, the woman who beat him, is a graduate of William & Mary. Enough said. And so, anyway, yes, thank you. And so, nothing to do with me. It was just exciting. So, because I've never been on it. But anyway, so she won. But she won by playing the same way he did. By taking risk after risk and searching for the daily double. She defeated Arthur Chu by taking the same risks that he did. Every day in life, we're faced with these choices. And for the most part, there's only a couple that have dramatic impact in our lives. Just a couple. But we always have to decide, is the risk worth the choice? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? We're in the season of Lent. Historically in the church, 40 days before Easter, not counting Sundays. And for the past few thousand years, during the season of Lent, believers have come together and acknowledged, named out loud, we're not the people we ought to be. We're not living like we ought to live. We're not acting like we ought to act. We're not doing the things God wants us to do. And we spend some time during the 40 days of Lent doing something that requires sacrifice on our part, so that whenever we finally get to Easter, we feel good about ourselves because we have sacrificed something to be a little more worthy of encountering the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. And so during Lent, we do things like we give up chocolate, or we give up soda, or we give up social networking. That's the big thing this year for a lot of people. And so we give all that up, and we feel really uncomfortable about this during Lent, and then we get to Easter, and we can hold our heads up high because I've sacrificed something great during the 40 days of Lent, and then we celebrate Easter. But what normally happens, be honest, you don't have to speak out loud, but for most of us, what normally happens is the week after Easter, the day after Easter, we go back to doing the things that we gave up, and we have a life that is, by and large, unchanged. So what happens is we need another Lent next year, right? And we need another Lent the year after that, and another Lent the year after that, and 500 years from now, and 1,000 years from now, we'll still be doing Lent. Admitting we're not the people we should be, not living how we ought to live, how we ought to be better people, and get better, and do a little sacrifice, go through Easter, and then go back to doing what we've always done. You see, Lent, by its very nature, is calling us to take some kind of assessment of our souls, of our lives. To somehow acknowledge we're not the people God wants us to be, and we have a desire to get there, but is it worth the sacrifice? You see, this season during Lent, we're using a resource called Soul Revolution. And a lot of you have been wrestling with it and using it to help you in your daily devotions. And the key word here is revolution of the soul. And revolution brings to mind these images of discontent, images of protest, images where I'm not happy with the status quo and the passion gets so great that it results in violence against the status quo. That's a revolution. We understand revolutions in this country. That's how our country was formed, with the revolution. And when the desire, the discontent, the desire to move away from the current situation, the current status quo becomes too great, it results in violence against the status quo. That's a revolution. And so we gather during the season of Lent to say we're not happy with the current situation of our souls. But for the past 2,000 years, we tend to do as little as possible, risk as little as possible, do nothing as much as possible, so that after Easter we can feel good about ourselves knowing there's another Lent coming next year. That's how it works. But the question that ultimately we need to wrestle with is, Is what we're doing worthy of the great sacrifice Jesus gave? Is giving up the chocolate or the soda or the social networking and being a little uncomfortable and inconvenienced worthy? When you arrived on Ash Wednesday,